The day my father's will was read, I sat in the quiet office, my heart racing. My father, Michael Harper, had built a fortune of $40 million, and with him departed, I believed I would at least have a piece of his legacy. But before the lawyer even opened the folder, my stepmother, Vanessa, leaned across the table with a smile that felt more like a knife. She whispered, "Don't expect a penny, Ethan. Your father and I talked about this. Everything is mine now." Her words struck me like a hammer. For years, Vanessa treated me as though I didn't belong, as if I was a guest in my own father's home. Now, sitting there with my Uncle Robert beside me, she looked completely at ease, like victory was already hers. She crossed her legs, leaned back in her chair, and waited to observe me break. I gripped my hands under the table, striving to remain composed. I could see my mother, Karen, sitting a few chairs down, her jaw rigid with anger. She had always shielded me from Vanessa's harshness, but there was nothing she could do here. This was the moment that would determine everything. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, his voice steady as he began to recite. My stepmother's smile grew wider with every phrase. She believed she had already won. But then he turned the page, cleared his throat, and spoke one line that erased the smile off her face and gave me a reason to finally breathe. I never thought I would walk into a room where my father's life's work was going to be divided like goods at an auction. That morning, when I dressed in a dark suit that felt too heavy for my shoulders, the sorrow was still intense. My father, Michael Harper, was gone. He had been a giant in my world, a gentleman who built his fortune from nothing and never once let me forget the worth of diligent work. He didn't indulge me, but he made certain I knew I mattered. And yet, as I sat in the quiet law office, where his will was to be read, I felt as if I was about to be obliterated. The office was old and respectable, with polished timber partitions and racks of law books that exuded a slight scent of dust. Thick drapes softened the sunlight, leaving the room in a kind of solemn gloom. My Uncle Robert, my father's junior sibling, sat beside me. Robert was a gentleman who always conducted himself with quiet strength. He wasn't affluent like Michael, but he had a way of making me feel centered. When I was a boy, he would recount stories of how Michael had built his initial property transaction by pure persistence, tapping on entrances until someone granted him a chance. Uncle Robert had always been proud of my father, and he reminded me frequently that I was made of the same cloth. Across from us sat Vanessa, my stepmother. She was attired in a dark satin garment, her hair arranged flawlessly, not a strand out of place, but her face told a distinct account than grief. While I sat with my back rigid against the chair, my hands pushed into my knees, Vanessa sat comfortably, her body inclined slightly toward the lawyer, as if she were waiting for him to confirm what she already held. Her lips carried a slight smile that did not belong in a room meant for sorrow. I had endured that look for years, the look that declared she was in command and I was merely an inconvenience. Vanessa came into my father's existence when I was 15. My parents had separated 2 years earlier, and my mother, Karen, had done everything she could to keep us unified. She wasn't wealthy. She didn't possess the kind of influence Michael did, but she cherished me intensely. When Michael presented Vanessa, I tried to be courteous. She was younger than him, keen and lovely in a way that attracted notice. At first, I hoped she might be someone I could coexist with, but I swiftly understood that she saw me as rivalry, as a reminder of the life my father had lived before her. She would diminish me with casual harshness. If I came to call on weekends, she would scoff at the garments my mother bought me. "Your father works hard for his standing, Ethan," she would say. "Try not to look like you don't belong." If I spoke up at dinner, she would rotate her gaze and remind me that I was merely a youngster. And if my father wasn't in the room, she sometimes bent near and whispered things I'll never forget. "One day, it will all be mine. You'll see." At first, I brushed it off as jealousy or insecurity, but over the years, her words accumulated like rocks on my chest. I learned to stay silent around her. My visits to my father's house became shorter, my conversations with him more tense. I loved him, but I despised the environment she fashioned around him. Still, there were moments that recalled that my father did concern himself. He would beckon me away from her acidic language, and ask how I was performing academically. He urged me to achieve high marks, to think about commerce, to never let anyone tell me I wasn't sufficient. You have my kinship within you, son. He once told me that's valued more than any slight. Those words stayed with me even when Vanessa tried to overwhelm them. Now, sitting in that law office, I wasn't sure which version of my father I was about to face. Was he the man who once told me I was powerful and competent? Or was he the husband who permitted his second partner to rule the room and disregard me? My apprehension wasn't just about money. It was about whether my father had trusted me in the end, whether I held sufficient importance for him to leave me a piece of his legacy. My mother sat 2 seats down, her face pulled taut. She wasn't here for money either. She possessed no right to my father's holdings, and she knew it. She came because she declined to permit me to be seated solitarily. She had suffered years of observing Vanessa demean me, and now she watched with eyes keen as crystal, prepared to shield me if the slight resumed. The lawyer, a tall man named Daniel, cleared his throat and arranged the documents in front of him. His voice was steady, skilled, and without feeling. He clarified that my father's will had been meticulously drafted and updated just a few months before his demise. The words suspended densely in the atmosphere, every sound reverberating off the timber-lined partitions. Vanessa moved in her chair, her smile expanding as if she were already relishing her victory. I could feel her eyes darting toward me, waiting for the moment when my face would crumble, when letdown would devastate me. She wanted to see me defeated. She wanted to remove me from my father's history finally and completely. My Uncle Robert bent nearer, his voice low so only I could hear. "Composure, Kin," he said. "Your father was a gentleman of conviction. Remember that." His words were a small mooring in the tempest building within me. I seated myself more upright, gazing at the lawyer, readying myself for whatever was about to come. I had no command over the phrases he was about to recite. No power to alter what my father had written. All I could do was listen, hope, and maintain my composure in the face of Vanessa's quiet, harsh victory. In that moment, I realized this was not just the recitation of a will. This was a trial of every element my father had ever taught me about fortitude, dignity, and endurance. It was not only about $40 million. It was about the burden of my title, the assessment of my worth, and the ultimate inquiry of whether my father's affection had outlasted Vanessa's venom. The moment the lawyer began reading, the room contracted like a snare. His voice was calm and deliberate, but every word felt like a hammer against my chest. He started with small allocations, contributions to benevolent organizations, and minor gifts to remote family members. My mind was partially present, partially elsewhere, revisiting my stepmother Vanessa's sneer and the way she reclined like she was already ruler of the realm my father had constructed. When Daniel read out that Vanessa was to obtain command of specific domestic funds and private possessions, she sighed gradually and tilted her chin upward. Her contentment was not discreet. She looked at me quickly, her lips bending to a slight smile as if to say, "See, it is all mine, exactly as I vowed." I sensed warmth creep up my nape, but I compelled myself not to respond. My mother's hand constricted over her handbag. She did not speak, but her eyes sliced toward Vanessa with sufficient fervor to ignite the table. My Uncle Robert, unwavering as always, seated himself vertically, attending meticulously, almost like he anticipated something Vanessa did not. The lawyer continued naming estates, funds, and holdings that seemed to transfer to Vanessa's favor. Each one was like a minor knife in my side. A holiday residence in California vanished. A great farm my father purchased 10 years prior. Gone. Even his artwork assemblage, which I knew he treasured, registered in her title. The burden of Vanessa's certainty pushed against me more intensely with every line. She leaned forward slightly and murmured not loud enough for the lawyer to hear, but loud enough for me. "You should have made ready. You were never intended to share in this." He wanted me to possess everything. Her words awakened years of recollection. The night she scoffed at me across the dining surface. The morning she caused me to feel like I was calling on an unfamiliar person's residence instead of my father's. The innumerable occasions she informed me I was insignificant. Seated there, listening to her murmur, I nearly accepted her words. What if my father had allowed her to prevail? What if in the end he disregarded his own son? I tightened my mouth, struggling with the ache in my chest. I had vowed to myself I would not allow her to witness my collapse. My father had once told me, Strength is not about yelling louder than the world. It is about remaining upright when others anticipate your downfall. Those words reverberated within me, but they were becoming weak against the devastating noise of Vanessa's victory. The lawyer halted to turn over a pile of documents. Pages whispered the noise occupying the quiet. I noticed Vanessa's mirror image in the polished timber of the table. Her smile was expanding, her certainty emitting like warmth. She believed the contest was finalized. Then the lawyer cleared his throat. Before I continue, I want to remind everyone that this will was updated 3 months before Mr. Harper's demise. Every clause is lawfully required and contains his ultimate desires. Vanessa's smile did not waver, but mine did. My father had altered provisions recently, and I had no idea what they were. Was it possible that he had truly moved all assets toward her? Was this his way of advancing past me, from my mother, from the kin he abandoned? Uncertainty coiled around my chest like a shackle. I rotated my skull marginally and met my mother's eyes. She gave me a look that said, regardless of the outcome, you are not solitary. For a second, the tension lessened, but Vanessa would not let me inhale. She leaned in closer, her voice a serpent's whisper. Do you see now? He relied on me, not you. You were just his trial kinship. And now it is my opportunity to continue his title. Her words cut deep, sharper than anything she had ever said before. My fists curled under the table. I wanted to shout at her, to shred her grin apart with every ounce of fury I had concealed for years. But Uncle Robert placed his hand on my arm, solid and stable. His voice was a whisper low enough that only I could hear. Maintain your composure, Ethan. Your father was not unaware. Those words struck differently. My father was not blind. He discerned people more keenly than anyone I had ever known. He had once told me that prosperity unmasks genuine nature, that when money is on the line, you discover who an individual truly is. I wondered if this moment was exactly what he had prepared me for. Still, the moments lingered like 60 minutes. Daniel's voice continued announcing allocations of shareholdings, investment accounts, and business assets. Vanessa's respiration became feebler, almost like she was relishing the sound of it. My chest grew heavier with every detail. It felt like being interred prematurely beneath the burden of my father's domain. Each asset another spade of soil. Finally, Vanessa leaned back and spoke openly, her voice clear. I told you, Ethan. Your father depended on me with all things. You should discover tranquility in that. He knew you were not ready. My mother's face solidified, and for a moment I thought she might retort to her, but she held her tongue. Uncle Robert maintained his grip steady on my arm. I understood then why he had come. He knew Vanessa would turn the blade at every opportunity, and he knew I would need fortitude not to collapse. The dispute was no longer just about legacy. It was about my father's ultimate assessment of me, whether he believed in the son he cultivated or the woman who married him. And in that room, with Vanessa's arrogant smile and the lawyer's unwavering tone, I felt myself wavering on the brink of hopelessness. The lawyer moved in his seat, gaze examining the concluding leaf. He looked up, his expression inscrutable, and for the first time since the recitation began, Vanessa's smile flickered. It was brief, but I caught it. A shadow of doubt crossed her face. I seated myself more upright in my chair, my heart pounding as the strain in the room intensified like a blade. Something was about to happen. And for the first time since I walked into that office, I allowed myself optimism. The atmosphere in the room had grown dense, saturated with quiet between the lawyer's words. Every phrase that had already been read clung to me like shackles, pulling me deeper into the dread that my father had truly left me nothing. Across the table, Vanessa's certainty streamed off her like fragrance, dominant and stifling. She sat with her legs crossed, one hand resting delicately on the rest of the seat, her grin intact. She believed the contest was won, but then the lawyer shifted, pushing a fresh page out of the portfolio. His visage altered very minutely, a stiffening near the lips, a subtle glance of the gaze toward me before returning to the document. It was the smallest crack in the tediousness, but it was enough to make me sit more loftily. Vanessa noticed too, and for the first time that morning, her smile weakened. My chest tightened with a strange mix of terror and optimism. I wanted to believe my father had not forsaken me, but years of Vanessa's words echoed in my mind, She had told me so many times that he trusted her, that I was forgotten, that I was insignificant. I could hear her voice even now, murmuring that I did not matter. And yet in that moment I made a decision. I would not crumble under her gaze. Whether I received nothing or everything, I would not give her the gratification of witnessing my destruction. My father's ultimate teaching to me had concerned fortitude. I remember his exact words from a conversation years ago when I was having difficulty academically. Ethan, the world will look for ways to shame you. Don't hand it to them. Be erect even if you possess naught. I uncrossed my arms, sat upright, and compelled myself to meet my stepmother's stare. Her sneer jerked when she realized I was no longer retracting. For the first time that day, she looked at me with a trace of annoyance, as if my refusal to collapse was an offense to her victory. Uncle Robert leaned closer and murmured, "That's it? Don't let her win before you've even heard the last word." His voice was low and calm, but firm enough to steady me. The lawyer continued reading, his voice steady. To my wife, Vanessa Harper, I leave the residence we occupied along with a perpetual stipend of $160,000 annually to be disbursed from the holdings fund. The words hit the table like a sonic boom. Vanessa's smile froze. She blinked, her hand constricting on the rest of the chair. She had been expecting numbers in the millions, not a yearly allowance smaller than a single month of my father's revenue. For a momentary flash, her facade fractured, and I saw something unrefined below it. Apprehension. She swiftly regained control, brushing a strand of hair from her face, but the injury was inflicted. She no longer appeared so assured. The lawyer paused briefly, allowing the burden of his phrases to sink in before turning to the next page. My heart pounded in my auditory canals. My mother's eyes lit with a sharp gleam, as if she knew what was about to come. Uncle Robert gave my shoulder a firm press, almost like he had been expecting this result the entire time. Vanessa's voice cut through the silence, sharp and fragile. This cannot be right. My spouse would never restrict me to an allowance. He depended on me with all things. The lawyer did not flinch. Mrs. Harper, I assure you, these are Mr. Harper's final instructions, signed and attested lawfully 3 months prior to his demise. Her jaw tightened, but she forced a chuckle that sounded hollow. Of course. I am certain the majority of the holdings is still directed to me. Michael always said he wanted me to be secure. I stayed quiet though, inside my chest burned. Her certainty was deteriorating, and I could feel the shift in the air. For years, she had told me I was nothing, that she was everything. And now with each word the lawyer read, her foundation was breaking. In that moment, I chose not to conceal myself further. I leaned forward, my voice calm but clear. Funny, Vanessa, I don't recall my father ever saying he built his domain for you. He constructed it for his kin. Her head jerked toward me, eyes flashing. You assume you grasp his desires? She ejected. You were a youngster when he reached his verdicts. You don't understand the gentleman he evolved into. I did not raise my voice. I met her glare head on and said, I know the man who raised me, and he never turned his back on his son. The lawyer cleared his throat to continue, but in that exchange, something important had shifted. Vanessa was shaken, no longer untouchable. For years, she had flourished on my quietness, my reluctance, my dread. By speaking, by refusing to yield, I had recovered something back from her. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and prepared to read the final clause. My chest swelled with anticipation and dread all at once. I could feel that everything was building toward this moment, the decision my father had left behind. The assessment he had made, not just of Vanessa, but of me. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. The smugness drained from her face. She sat forward now, her hands clasped tightly together, her fingernails digging into her palms. She no longer looked like the woman who had walked into this room certain of her power. She looked like someone who feared losing everything. My mother's hand brushed against mine, a quiet reminder that she was still with me, no matter what happened. Uncle Robert gave me a slight nod, his lips pressing into the hint of a smile. He knew somehow he had always known my father would not leave me behind. I inhaled deeply, stabilizing myself. Whether the next sentence confirmed Vanessa's arrogant prediction or revealed something entirely different, I was ready to face it without fear. I would not be the boy Vanessa had spent years mocking. I would be the man my father raised, a man who could stand tall even in the face of betrayal. The lawyer lifted his eyes, his voice firm as he began to read the final words of the will. The entire room leaned forward, waiting for the verdict that would decide everything. The room was silent as the lawyer looked down at the final page of the will. His fingers pressed lightly against the paper, his voice steady, but carrying a weight that pulled every eye toward him. I could hear nothing but the pounding of my heart. Vanessa sat stiffly, her confident posture gone, her hands now clenched tightly in her lap. The lawyer began to recite. To my treasured spouse, Vanessa Harper, I leave the solace of our shared home and the perpetual stipend of $160,000 a year. This is to ensure she will never lack for essentials or amenities. Vanessa's lips parted, her face blanching. She opened her mouth to object, but the lawyer raised his voice just slightly, continuing without pause. The entirety of my estate, including all property possessions, company stocks, ventures, and assets totaling $40 million, I leave in full and permanent possession to my only son, Ethan Harper. The words struck the room like a sonic boom. For a second, the silence was complete, dense, and absolute. My breath caught in my chest. I had expected something. A small portion maybe, but not this, not everything. Vanessa's chair screeched as she lurched forward, her voice sharp and frantic. What? That cannot be right. There must be a mistake. The lawyer lowered the page, his eyes meeting hers with professional calm. Mrs. Harper, I can assure you this document was prepared with your husband's direct input, signed and witnessed 3 months before his demise. There is no mistake. Vanessa slammed her palm against the table. No, he promised me security. He told me I would be the one to carry on his legacy. You expect me to believe he gave all of it to this youth? She ejected the word like it was venom. My mother sat straighter, her jaw set in quiet triumph, but she said nothing. Uncle Robert, however, leaned forward, his voice even but edged with satisfaction. Michael was a man of clarity. Vanessa, if this is what he wrote, this is what he meant. He trusted his son. Vanessa turned her fury on me, her eyes blazing. You think you deserve this? You were seldom present. You let him down more times than you can count. He told me things, Ethan. He said you were not ready. He said you lacked his discipline. I met her glare without flinching. For years, I had let her words sink into me, but not now. Not after hearing my father's final judgment. I took a deep breath and spoke, my voice steady. He may have doubted me at times, but in the end, he trusted me. That was his choice, not yours. Her hands trembled against the table. You manipulated him. That is the only explanation. He would never. Her voice broke off, the words choking in her throat. She turned back to the lawyer. Read it again. There must be some hidden clause, some condition. The lawyer cleared his throat. There are no conditions. The estate belongs entirely to Mr. Ethan Harper. Those were your husband's explicit instructions. The finality in his voice left no room for argument. Vanessa's face collapsed, her mask of elegance shattering into raw panic. She pressed a hand to her forehead, shaking her head in disbelief. This cannot be happening. Inside me, something shifted. For years, I had lived under the shadow of her cruelty, doubting my worth, questioning whether my father saw me as anything more than a burden. But here, in black and white, his faith in me was undeniable. It was not just money. It was his trust, his recognition, his final lesson. I looked at my uncle. His eyes shone with quiet pride. He gave me a small nod as if to say, this is the man Michael raised. My mother placed a hand on mine, her grip strong. She whispered, he believed in you all along. Vanessa's voice rose again, desperate and ragged. I will challenge this. I will take it to court. You cannot just hand everything to him and leave me with scraps. The lawyer's expression remained calm. You are entitled to pursue legal action, Mrs. Harper, but this will is airtight. Your husband was very deliberate in protecting his son's inheritance. Vanessa's fury twisted into something darker, her words spitting out like broken glass. You think you won, Ethan. Money will not make you strong. You will fail, and when you do, you will wish you had me to guide you. I stood then, no longer willing to sit in the chair that had bound me in silence. My voice cut through the tension, clear and unwavering. No, Vanessa, I do not need your guidance. My father believed in me, and that is more powerful than anything you could ever take away. Her face went pale, her lips trembling, but she had no reply. She slumped back into her chair, her fury collapsing into silence. The lawyer gathered the documents, his task complete. That concludes the reading of the will. His words marked the end of more than just a legal process. They marked the end of Vanessa's reign over me, the end of her harsh whispers, the end of her power. As I stood in that room, the weight of $40 million resting on my shoulders, I realized the inheritance was not just about wealth, it was about vindication. My father had seen me, trusted me, and chosen me. For years I had doubted it, but now I carried the undeniable proof. Vanessa sat frozen, her silence louder than her threats. My mother and uncle stood beside me, their presence a shield against her glare. I walked toward the door, each step lighter than the last. Before I left, I turned back to Vanessa one final time. You were right about one thing. He made a choice, but it was not the choice you wanted. It was the choice that showed who he truly trusted, and it was not you. Her eyes burned with rage, but there was nothing left for her to say. The will had spoken. I stepped out into the hallway, breathing deeply for the first time since I had entered the office. My father's legacy was now mine, but more than that, his belief in me was carved into stone. Vanessa could never take that away. Walking out of that office felt like stepping into a new life. The air outside was crisp, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without the weight of Vanessa's presence pressing down on me. The will had been read, the verdict had been given, and the truth was undeniable. My father had trusted me. His empire, his legacy, his fortune, all of it was in my hands now. But what mattered most was not the money. It was the clarity. For years, I had doubted myself because Vanessa told me I was unworthy. I carried her words like chains, believing her scoffs and whispers meant my father secretly agreed with her. When he was alive, I never asked him outright because a part of me was too afraid of the answer. Now I finally had it. He had not abandoned me. He had chosen me. As I walked down the steps of the law office, my mother was right behind me. She placed her hand on my arm, her grip steady. Your father knew exactly who you were, Ethan. He was proud of you. Don't ever forget that. Her voice carried a mix of relief and quiet triumph. For years she had watched Vanessa humiliate me. She had held her tongue, fought her battles in silence, and prayed that the truth would one day come to light. Today it had. Uncle Robert joined us at the curb, his weathered face breaking into a smile I had never seen from him before. Your father never doubted you. He wanted you to prove yourself, and you did. Now you carry his name. Carry it well. I nodded through the weight of his words pressed against me. $40 million was more than wealth. It was responsibility. My father had spent his life constructing brick by brick, deal by deal. Every decision he made was about more than money. It was about vision and resolve. I knew that inheriting his estate meant more than possessing resources. It meant proving myself worthy of his trust. Vanessa stayed behind in the office. I could imagine her sitting there stunned and broken, her carefully crafted world collapsing around her. For years, she believed she could control the narrative that my father's empire would fall into her lap. Instead, she had been given comfort and security, but not power. That distinction mattered, and it was intentional. My father had seen through her ambition and chosen to protect me. That night, when I returned home, I sat alone in my room for hours. The documents from the lawyer were stacked neatly on the desk. $40 million, entire company's properties across the country. I should have felt powerful, but instead, I felt humbled. My father had not given me these things to make me comfortable. He had left them as a challenge, a responsibility. I thought about the lessons he had taught me, the mornings he pushed me to get up early, the times he told me not to waste energy proving myself to people who wanted to see me fail, the quiet way he reminded me that his blood ran through my veins. And that meant something. Those lessons mattered more than any number written on a page. In the days that followed, I began to feel a shift. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly called. Distant relatives congratulated me as if they had always believed in me. Some of them wanted favors, some wanted money, and some just wanted to attach themselves to what they thought was power. My father's warning came back to me. Wealth reveals character. He had been right. I saw people more clearly than I ever had before. But the most important realization was this. I no longer lived in Vanessa's shadow. For years, she had defined how I saw myself. Every insult, every sneer, every whispered threat had dug into my self-worth. Now, her power was gone, and with it, the lie that I was insignificant. When I visited my father's grave the following week, I stood in silence for a long time before speaking. You trusted me, Dad. I won't waste it. I'll honor what you build, and I'll make sure no one ever says your son wasn't strong enough. It wasn't just a promise to him, it was a promise to myself. The lesson I took from that day was simple but powerful. People will try to convince you that you are small, that you do not belong, that you cannot stand on your own. If you listen to them, you hand them your strength. But if you trust yourself, if you remember who you are and where you come from, no one can erase you. Vanessa thought she had already won. She thought she could rewrite my father's legacy and strip me of my place in his story. But in the end, the truth stood taller than her lies. My father believed in me. That belief is what I carry forward, more valuable than any number in a bank account. And that is why I smiled when the lawyer read that final sentence. If you found this story powerful, make sure to like the video so more people can see it. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth. Leave a comment below and tell me what you would have done if you were in my place. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat.